For millennia, humanity has viewed the universe as a vast, magnificent, yet fundamentally indifferent stage, a passive, cold backdrop against which the fleeting drama of human life unfolds. We are taught that reality is governed by immutable, mechanistic laws, the relentless push of gravity, the inevitable decay of thermodynamics, and the certainty of blind, impartial randomness. In this rigid Newtonian model, our emotions, our transcendent joy, our debilitating fear, our deepest, most private desire are merely internal chemical storms, entirely separate from the external physical domain. We are, by definition, the powerless actors. The universe is merely the vast, inert theater. This perception of universal indifference has shaped our science, our philosophy, and our deepest existential anxieties. It justifies our sense of isolation and the belief that effort alone, brute force applied to an uncaring system, is the only path to change. But what if this fundamental assumption, this cornerstone of modern thought, is the greatest and most profound illusion of all? What if the space around us is not empty, but a dense, dynamic, energetic field, a sea of pure potentiality, a continuous sentient fabric that is actively monitoring, interpreting, and ultimately responding to our deepest, most coherent internal states? What if the universe is not a passive stage for life, but a living matrix, a responsive, intelligent system designed for co-creation? This radical, paradigm-shifting concept that reality is a customizable operating system running on an emotional code is rapidly moving from the fringe of esoteric thought into the advanced labs of quantum physics, consciousness studies, and psychoneuroimmunology. It suggests that every focused thought is a subtle instruction, every coherent emotion is a resonant energy signature, and that our consciousness doesn't just observe reality, it is fundamentally and intrinsically involved in writing the script. The initial, tentative journey into the living matrix begins not with complex metaphysics, but with the crumbling certainty of scientific randomness. For decades, researchers sought to understand true chance. They built meticulously engineered machines designed to produce data devoid of all human pattern or intention, truly random number generators, RNGs. These machines were intended to be the universe's ultimate baseline, the impartial measure of true passivity. The crisis of certainty arose when these passive machines started to demonstrate inexplicable, consistent changes whenever humans were present and focused. Chapter 2. The Quantum Field and the Resonance Principle. The first empirical, undeniable cracks in the passive universe model appeared dramatically at the legendary Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Laboratory, led by the brilliant but often controversial Dr. Robert Jahan. The peer experiments sought to test, with rigorous scientific methodology, the influence of human consciousness on those very random number generators. The setup was deceptively simple. An electronic RNG machine produced a perfectly random stream of binary data, zeros and ones. Volunteers were then asked to sit near the machine and attempt, purely through intention, to influence the output. They were asked to will the machine to produce slightly more ones, high bias, or slightly more zeros, low bias, over hundreds of trials. Statistically, over millions of trials, the results should have been absolutely flat, clustered perfectly around the 50% mark, following the laws of pure probability. But the data unequivocally showed they weren't. Over years of meticulous data collection and thousands of experimental runs, the researchers consistently observed a small, statistically significant, consistent deviation from chance. When highly focused participants intended a positive bias, the machine produced slightly more ones. When they intended a negative bias, it shifted slightly toward zeros. The effect was indeed tiny, often less than a fraction of a percent deviation from the mean, but it was mathematically replicable across different subjects, different geographic locations, and different experimenters. The critical factor was not the physical presence of the person nor the distance from the machine. It was the coherence and purity of their emotional and mental state. The machine wasn't reacting to hands or eyes, it was reacting to focused intent. This discovery fundamentally introduced the concept of the consciousness field, a pervasive, subtle, but powerful field much like gravity or electromagnetism that demonstrably connects the internal state of the observer to the external operation of the physical world. The field theory proposes that our emotions act as a form of non-local energy, subtly tuning the local physical environment to match the internal frequency. Intense fear causes the field to contract and cohere around negative probabilities, drawing unfavorable circumstances. Coherent, focused desire, fueled by gratitude and certainty, causes the field to expand and align possibilities, drawing desirable outcomes. The implications were staggering and existential. If consciousness, operating purely through thought and feeling, can influence the purely random output of a machine, then the living matrix is demonstrating that the bedrock of our physical reality is not inert, but fundamentally permeable and resonant to focused human consciousness. Further research in this domain led to the Global Consciousness Project, which monitored a network of RNG devices placed around the world. These devices showed unusual, coherent spikes of non-randomness precisely during globally synchronous emotional events, such as the collapse of the Twin Towers on 9/11 or moments of mass celebration. The field was not only individual, but profoundly collective.
Chapter 3: The Emotional Code and the Deep Structure of Manifestation. If the living matrix is constantly receiving and interpreting our energetic, emotional frequency, then our persistent, dominant internal states form the fundamental emotional code that actively rewrites our local reality's possibilities. This mechanism moves far beyond mere pop psychology notions of positive thinking. It suggests a fundamental, measurable mechanism of materialization rooted in quantum entanglement. Consider the enormous wealth of anecdotal evidence, the so-called mystical stories of instantaneous healing, finding the perfect partner, or achieving sudden, inexplicable success that now find a theoretical, scientific framework within the living matrix model. These are not miracles. They are instances of highly coherent emotional coding, achieving rapid physical response. A famous contemporary case involves the novelist Julianne. For years, she suffered from acute writer's block, driven by the anxiety of needing to meet publishers' deadlines and expectations. Her emotional code was broadcasting pressure and fear of failure. The matrix responded by manifesting blockages, computer crashes, sudden illness, and crippling self-doubt. Julianne changed her approach. She stopped focusing on the need for success and instead focused on the profound, intense feeling of creative freedom and gratitude for the story itself. She cultivated an emotional code of effortless flow and creative coherence. Within weeks, the block dissolved. She completed her manuscript in a burst of energy, and its subject matter was revealed to be impossibly relevant to a news event that occurred months later. Julianne didn't try to manifest. She deliberately and consistently changed her broadcast frequency from anxiety to coherence. The universe, reading her new code of creative abundance, reorganized external events, her health, her focus, and the timing of related external events to match her internal state. The key to accessing the matrix's powerful responsiveness lies not merely in the thought, which is inert without power, but in the emotion that accompanies it. A thought without feeling is like a command sent with no power source. A thought infused with coherent emotional certainty, pure joy, deep gratitude, profound, unquestioning peace is a potent, high-voltage instruction set for the living matrix. The emotion acts as the necessary power supply, the engine of creation that pushes the thought into physical manifestation. This phenomenon explains why moments of pure love, intense creativity, or profound religious experience often feel like a state of flow. You are perfectly in sync with the living matrix, and reality is effortlessly bending to your will. Chapter 4: Temporal Sculpting and the Deep Mechanics of Synchronicity. The living matrix is not solely individual. It is also an unimaginably vast, interconnected collective field. When large populations or groups share the same dominant emotional frequency, the effect on the local reality can be seismic and undeniable. Historical data is rife with examples of collective emotional coding. Periods of mass panic or pervasive fear often coincide tragically with epidemics, wars, or economic collapses, not just as a result of external forces, but perhaps as a dynamic consequence of the sustained negative broadcast of the collective consciousness. Conversely, periods of sustained mass optimism, post-war unity, or technological exuberance often unlock rapid, unprecedented bursts of social and scientific progress. The collective field acts as a massive amplifier for the emotional code, moving reality toward the dominant shared resonance. The matrix's most beautiful and compelling signature is synchronicity. Coined by the analytical psychologist Carl Jung, synchronicity is defined as the meaningful coincidence of inner psychic events and outer physical events that share no causal link. For the living matrix, synchronicity is the irrefutable proof of its active filtering and arranging system. When your internal emotional code is clear, unwavering, and coherent, the matrix begins to align external elements, people, places, opportunities, even fragments of conversation, to perfectly reflect that internal state. The theoretical physicist Dr. Alistair Finch, building upon the work of Peirce, theorizes that the matrix achieves synchronicity through a precise, sophisticated process he calls temporal sculpting. The matrix doesn't violate conservation laws by creating matter out of nothing. Instead, it subtly shifts and rearranges the timeline of existing matter and events across the probabilistic landscape. It might delay a crucial bus by exactly 5 minutes so that you meet a stranger at the next corner. Or it might ensure a rare, necessary book remains unsold on a distant shelf until the precise moment your emotional code is aligned to receive its knowledge. Reality, under this model, is not a fixed path, but a complex, continuously updated loom, and our coherent consciousness actively pulls the threads of time, probability, and possibility together. Furthermore, Finch postulates the existence of entanglement residue, the idea that once two people or objects are linked by a strong emotional code, such as a shared destiny or deep love, the matrix maintains a probabilistic pathway between them, making their meeting or interaction statistically far more likely than chance would dictate. Synchronicity is simply the evidence of this maintained pathway.
Chapter 5. The Dark Mirror and the Protocol of Coherence. The living matrix is utterly impartial. It does not judge the emotional code as good or evil, right or wrong. It only registers the frequency, the intensity, and the sustained coherence. This terrifying impartiality leads directly to the matrix's dark side, the self-fulfilling catastrophe, a reality orchestrated by subconscious dread. Individuals trapped in cycles of negative, highly coherent emotion, chronic anxiety, deep-seated resentment, or a pervasive sense of victimhood are often perplexed as to why bad things always happen to them. The matrix, reading the coherent code of danger, lack, and betrayal, simply and impersonally reorganizes the external world to perfectly reflect that internal expectation. This is not cosmic punishment. It is pure, impersonal resonance in action. Their consistent emotional broadcast acts as a massive, powerful magnet for the very outcomes they desperately wish to avoid. Conversely, the phenomenon of the accidental visionary occurs when a person accidentally achieves a moment of profound, pure, positive coherence, manifesting a major life change despite their general disposition. The matrix responds to the strength of the current signal regardless of the historical noise.
The true goal, therefore, is not controlling the matrix, which is impossible, but achieving absolute awareness and mastery of the code being broadcast. The path to influencing the living matrix is the disciplined path of internal coherence, shifting from involuntary reaction to conscious authorship. This involves specific, measurable techniques utilized by advanced psychological practitioners, mindfulness experts, and mystics alike. Emotional calibration, the frequency shift. Consciously identifying the underlying negative emotional states that fuel the undesirable code, example, transforming frustration into calm curiosity, anxiety into deliberate gratitude for the present moment. This is the act of deliberately changing the dial on the broadcast. Coherent intention, the power infusion. Focusing the mind on the desired outcome while simultaneously cultivating and sustaining the feeling of having already achieved it. This bypasses the analytical mind and speaks directly to the matrix in its own language. Example, feeling the profound gratitude for the achieved abundance now. The observer state. Breaking the feedback loop. Separating one's conscious identity from the emotional broadcast, recognizing that I am not my fear, I am the observer of my fear. This breaks the involuntary automatic feedback loop with the matrix, allowing for intentional recalibration instead of reactive repetition. The silence protocol. Utilizing deep meditation and sustained periods of sensory deprivation to quiet the internal emotional noise, thereby allowing the living matrix's natural state of abundance and potentiality to briefly manifest in the individual's awareness, providing a template for creation. Chapter 6. Final Implications. Becoming the Architects of Reality. The living matrix radically repositions humanity from passive, helpless inhabitants of the universe to its active, indispensable co-creators. We are not just subjects of the laws of physics. We are now recognized as active participants in the negotiation and manifestation of those laws. The ultimate future challenge lies in moving from subconscious, accidental emotional coding, which currently characterizes most of human experience, to conscious, deliberate architectural design of our shared world. If the scientific evidence holds true, if intention can subtly, measurably influence the outcome of chance, then the future of human existence rests not just on technological innovation, but fundamentally on achieving collective emotional maturity and coherence. Imagine a society where the dominant, sustained emotional code is one of deep cooperation, profound gratitude, shared abundance, and peace. The living matrix, receiving this synchronized, powerful, high-frequency broadcast, would be compelled to manifest a reality that systematically eliminates scarcity, eradicates endemic disease, and resolves deep-seated conflict. The external world would become an effortless, harmonious reflection of the internal collective state. The ancient mystics knew this truth. The quantum physicists are now methodically confirming it. The small space between your ears, your consciousness, your emotional core, is not separate from the massive space outside your window. It is the sophisticated, complex control panel for your localized reality. The question is no longer what does the universe hold for us? The question is now, what coherent, powerful code are we holding for the universe? The living matrix is listening. It is waiting for your next instruction. It is waiting for you to realize that you are not just a user of this reality, but the conscious, emotional architect of your own existence and potentially the co-designer of the next stage of human evolution.